Hare Krishna devotees. Today Dharmam Prabhu will come and give the class. So we are waiting for him. He's there right here. He'll be there in a couple of minutes here. Here. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Yes. Vrindavan was great. Vrindavan was great. The environment was great. It was monsoon, but it was monsoon, so it was a little challenging.
Okay. Hare Krishna. What's supposed to be different than usual besides yeah, I'll put it somewhere.
Jaya Raja
Jaya Radha Madhava Yadihari
Jaya Raja Madhava Punjabi Jaya Vallabha Srivardhana Jaya Vallabha Srivardhana Yashodanandana Yasujana Ranjana Yashodanandana Yasujana Ranjana Yogatira Vanakari Yogatira Vanakari
Good day, Shri Bhakti Swami Pranamani, Namaste, Saraswati Devi, Gaurvani Pacharni, Yudhishthira Shri Bhakti Pacharni, Tarni, Vandeham Sri Guru Sviyatapara Kamalam, Sri Guru Vaishnavamscha, Shirupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam, Sadvaitam Sabdutam Krishna Sahitam, Krishna Chaitanya Devam, Sri Radha Krishna Padan, Sahagana Lalita Shri Sakhavitam Shah. So today we're reading from Bhagavad Gita, still the month of Purushottam. So that we read again from the Yoga of the Supreme Person, chapter 15. Sometimes this is called Purushottama Yoga, this chapter. Text number 6. Natad Vasyate Suryo Nashashanko Napavakaha. Yadgadvana Nivartante Tadama Brahmamama. Please repeat. Na Tad Vasyate Suryo Na Shashanko Na Pavaka Yad Gadva Na Nivartante Tad Dhamma Paramam Mama. Translation purport by Srila Prabhupada. That abode of mine is not illumined by the sun or moon or by electricity. One who reaches it never returns to this material world. For the spiritual world, the abode of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, which is known as Krishna Loka, or Loka Vrindavan, is described here. In the spiritual sky, there is no need of sunshine, moonshine, fire, or electricity, because all the planets are self-luminous. We have only one planet in this universe, the sun, which is self-luminous. But all the planets in the spiritual sky are self-luminous. The shining effulgence of all those planets, called Vaikuntras, constitutes the shining sky known as the Brahmajyoti. Actually, the effulgence is emanating from the planet of Krishna, Goloka Vrindavan. Part of that shining effulgence is covered by the Mahatattva, the material world. Other than this, the major portion of that shining sky is full of spiritual planets, which are called Vaikuntras, chief of which is Goloka Vrindavan. As long as a living entity is in this dark material world, he is in conditional life. But as soon as he reaches the spiritual sky, by cutting through the false, perverted tree of this material world, he becomes liberated. Then there is no chance of his coming back here. In his conditional life, the living entity considers himself to be the Lord of this material world. But in his liberated state, he enters into the spiritual kingdom and becomes the associate of the Supreme Lord. There he enjoys eternal bliss, eternal life, and full knowledge. See here, the personality of Godhead is speaking as the topmost authority by describing a little bit about the spiritual world. If somebody asks, why should I take up spiritual life? Why not just lead an ordinary life of eating, sleeping, mating in the family, having my profession, my house, and all these different types of regular activities in this world? The answer here is given. A little bit of the beauty of the spiritual world is described. There, no one has any suffering or anxiety. Now we may think, oh, I am happy. I have enough food to eat, enough shelter. I have a good income. But pretty soon, very quickly, by the force of time, the point of death will take place. A day from now, 2 days from now, 50 years from now. But in the course of eternal time, that is not very, it is not very much, it's not very considerable time. We should not consider living 30 or 40 or 50 years is great success, because then we have to take another body. So it says in Bhagavad Gita, the idea is by Lord Krishna explaining the wonders of the spiritual world, even in a very preliminary, simple way, that we should be absorbed in this. We should be really appreciative. We should have great wonder in our minds. Wow, what will it be like when I get a spiritual body? Now I have a mature body. We really can't conceive what it's like to have a spiritual body. We can conceive what it's like to have a mature body. There's pains and pleasures, and we can understand how it functions in the mature world. We have a desire to move our hand. But if the super soul doesn't fulfill our desire, we become paralyzed. So we can understand how in this mature world, we have so many, wonderful things in so many ways that as gifts given to us by nature. We have the sun, the moon, fire, and electricity. Each of us, whether we're an insect, bird, animal life, we have a kind of family. Even the mother of the birds takes great care to take care of the children. Why is that? The super soul gives what we call instinct, inspiration to the mother and father to protect the children. The human form of life is like that, and the bird and all the species of life. So we should be very much anxious to hear about the spiritual world, very much longing to go there. After being in the mature world for so long, and a little bit of understanding how the mature world is a place for suffering, we should be thinking, well, now is my time, the human form of life. I've been given so many gifts. Let me receive the great gift of transcendental knowledge from the bona fide spiritual master and try my best to finish my existence in the material world in this lifetime. And if I'm not really successful, it is a promise. In our next life, we'll have a very great situation where we'll be able to take up from, say, 15% to 16%. We'll start off in a very wonderful way. Or if we're 75%, like Maharaj Bharat, he was a very, very elevated personality, very Krishna conscious, but not 100%. When he was king, he gave up his kingdom and he went out to live out in some kind of a very renounced area, forest or whatever. And because he was not 100% Krishna conscious, somehow he fell in love with his baby deer that was injured, who was dependent upon his care. He cared for the deer, and he developed some kind of affection or attachment for the deer. Kind of like people have dogs or cats inside the house or on their property. And they may actually develop so much love for the dog, and the dog loves you back. It's even better than humans in some ways, because dogs love you back no matter what. But humans, sometimes they like you and sometimes they don't. So attachment can be there. So Maharaj Bharat, he was doing a wonderful thing by performing spiritual activities, but somehow or another he, if I remember the story right, he fell down and hit his head while he was taking care of the deer, and he left his body, he died. So he was thinking of that deer at the point of death. So again, he was not 100% Krishna conscious, but he was maybe a lot percentage. So when he came back, he was having a very special boon that he could remember in his human form of life. He took birth as a deer, then he had some kind of special boon where he could remember in his human life, was it Jad Bharat, that he was, he can remember a whole lot why he took birth again as a deer. So his example is that even if we are not 100% Krishna conscious, because really, honestly, it's very, very hard to be 100% Krishna conscious. Some of us are taking up spiritual life when we're 20 years old, 30 years old, 40 years old, or maybe we're taking it up at some age And we're a little bit conditioned on our many, many years of this lifetime. And it's hard to just break off everything and just kind of renounce, become. Even it's impossible to live in the forest like what is recommended, because no one is conditioned to living in some very renounced situation like that. So it may take a long, long time. So therefore, our enthusiasm should be that however long it takes, I will be determined to take to my spiritual activities. If I can't give this up now, let me do at least something. Let me at least try as best as possible. You know, for most of us, reading the books like Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna book should be pretty easy. You should be able to find 15 minutes a day to do that. If we have to wake up early, that's what we should do. We should have some kind of a Mangal Arti, some kind of a chanting of our rounds. We should try our best to do these things. There's an example given here of the authority of why we're performing these activities. Some of our neighbors or even relatives may ask, why are you performing this Hare Krishna Kirtan? Why don't you just be a regular person? Or why don't you just be a regular Buddhist or Christian or Hindu or whatever? Why do this Hare Krishna? They may think of it as a kind of a sect or maybe even a cult. So all of us may have to be in the situation where we can answer any of these questions. The authority comes from, for example, like Srimad Bhagavatam. 5,000 years ago, Shukadeva Goswami first spoke this to Maharaj Pariksit. Maharaj Pariksit was there. He was a great, great king. But when he was on tour, again, as a great devotee and king, he was on tour in his kingdom. And when he saw this yogi in deep meditation, the yogi supposedly should have broke his meditation and did something to receive the king. But he didn't. And the king got a little bit upset with him and put a snake around his neck. Then the yogi's son took the whole situation again too far. Oh, I will curse the king. And somehow this young boy had this power because of mantras that he could curse the king that he would die in 7 days. So Maharaj Pariksit, he could have counteracted this curse, but he took it just like any of us can do. We may have some reversal in life. As a devotee, we may get really, really agitated by the reversal, or we may accept it as Krishna's mercy, and we may do something which is transcendental and just accept it and go on with our spiritual activities. So anyway, the Maharaj Pariksit did not try to counteract the curse, but what he did was he, after discussion with the sages, they told him, you should hear Srimad Bhagavatam from Shukadeva Goswami. So he fasted for 7 days, no food or water, and he was able to hear Srimad Bhagavatam. And because of hearing, he is described as one of the devotees as an emblem of the hearing process that he became perfect. Then again, if you're reading Srimad Bhagavatam, it's a little bit complicated because the whole conversation, the Bhagavatam, 18,000 verses, was repeated again by Sutta Goswami to all the sages in Namisharanya. Amongst these two conversations, some of the other conversations from many, many sages in different times, way, way in the past, are brought in. So you have 3 or 4 conversations going on at the same time. So if you want to follow it, who's speaking and who's listening, you have to be a little bit attentive and try to understand the different conversations that are going on. So what happened is that these sages were there at the second recitation of the Bhagavatam, and Sutta Goswami was the reciting the Bhagavatam, and Shaunaka Rishi was the spokesman for all the sages who were listening. So Shaunaka Rishi is also asking questions. So we have again 3 or 4 or 5 different conversations going on, and we're finding out that these sages were asking very, very potent and powerful questions. They're asking, what is your authority for speaking? So in so many ways, they were explaining that the authority is that these are all information, knowledge coming down, what we call Vedic knowledge, and is coming down in parampara or disciplic succession. Normally, one person recites the knowledge, and in previous ages, there was no need for them to write it down because their memory was so perfect. So the sages, the publicly self-realized soul, like Shukadeva Goswami, Sudha Goswami, they can recite the Srimad Bhagavatam. And if a hearer was also perfect, there was no need of any writing things down. Their memory was so special. So what happened is that this process of Parampara allows us to accept a type of authority. If we have heard something in disciplic succession, because it's coming originally from the Supreme Personality of Godhead through self-realized sages, this Parampara is considered perfect. So what happened is that there was a time, maybe a few hundred years ago, when the authority of our Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya was also under discussion. There was this great sage, this great king named Jai Singh, and he was in the Jaipur area, Galta, Ambar, and he was very much favored towards the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. But there were other Vaishnavas in a different sect who had a lot of questions, maybe even almost like challenging. They were saying things like, well, why are you worshiping Radha and Krishna together? These different types of Vaishnavas, again, Ramanandi, a different sect, were questioning, Sita and Ram are married, we worship them together. Lakshmi and Ryan are married, we worship them together. Why do you have Radha and Krishna? Why is this worship is what you were doing? Why is this worship taking place? And again, Jai Singh was such a great saintly king, but at the same time, he was not going to be so much favoritism. He wanted all the different Vaishnavas to work it out amongst themselves. He went to Vrindavan at age 7, and he became very much attracted to the worship of the Supreme Lord at that time. And he was one of the Vaishnavas that synthesized all of their understandings. Because see, these different misunderstandings were not philosophical. They were not philosophical, they were based upon some small different ideas. So when this king Jai Singh, he was asking the different sects of Vaishnavas, he was asking them, please work out your differences amongst yourselves. The first question was, why are you worshiping Radha and Krishna together if they are not married? And what parampara are you in? This is very important because if somebody's a saintly person, if they're just trying to describe the Vedic knowledge, like for example, we don't find one verse, Vadanti tat tat vadam tasvam yajgaram madvayam. Rameti paramatmeti bhagavaniti shabhyate. If someone asks, what is the supreme knowledge like? It is called Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. Brahman is the all-pervading, beautiful, transcendental, ecstatic effulgence coming from the Vaikuntha planets, or from the body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then there is Paramatma, there is the all-pervading feature of the Lord of this material world, where he goes inside of each body and inside of each atom. And by his energy, all the planets are floating in space. So that is Paramatma, the Lord inside of our heart. And he is giving us remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness, as we were reciting the verse a few weeks ago. Then there is Bhagavan, the highest feature of the absolute truth, the personality of Godhead. So these are the kind of philosophical points. But they are asking, also, the Ramanandis were asking, not only why are you worshiping Radha and Krishna together, what parampara are you representing, but they were also asking the etiquette. Why don't you worship Narayan first before Radha Krishna? So these were points of contention, natural questions of debate or loving exchanges between the Vaishnavas. But it was also somewhat of a heated controversy going on for many, many years. So this King Jai Singh, he was thinking, I want to resolve this type of the situation. So he asked the Gaudiya Vaishnavas you must present an answer to all these other Vaishnavas. Why are you worshiping Radha Krishna together? What parampara are you in? They were challenged with this verse from the Puranas describing the. Let's see if I can find the verse. It says in Kali Yuga, there is 4 paramparas: Sri Parampara, Rudra Parampara, Brahma Parampara, and Sri Ramanujacharya, Sri Parama, Sri Vaishnavas. These 4 paramparas are all considered bona fide. So if someone says, I am a spiritual person, I am presenting spiritual knowledge, in Kali Yuga, these paramparas are considered the basis of all the different types of bona fide personalities who can explain knowledge. So this is a question. In the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, there was one devotee called Vishwanath Chakravarti, who was following these developments. He was living in Vrindavan, but he was about 60 years old. He had written many books. But he found this other devotee who was much younger, called Baldev Vidyabhushan. Now, Baldev Vidyabhushan was also very qualified, but he was young. He had studied the Vedanta Sutra from Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, all these different commentaries on the Shastras. So, Baldev Vidyabhushan was given the duty that he had to answer all these questions from the other Vaishnavas. Why are you worshiping Radha Krishna together? What sampradaya are you in? And when the Ramanandi Vaishnavas were questioning him, they said, you have to write a commentary, because there is no commentary of the Brahma Sampradaya. The devotees answered, well, we're followers of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He is the personality of Godhead. He just appeared just a short while ago. We are part of his mission, part of his movement. We don't have to validate ourselves because we're part of the personality of Godhead's mission. And the other point of contention was that the Vedanta Sutra was the main scripture that everybody was asking about commentaries on. All the other sampradayas had a commentary on Vedanta Sutra, but the Gaudiya Vaishnavas did not. So they were asking Baladev to write a commentary on the Vedanta Sutra so that the authority, the Gaudiya Vaishnavas could be presented. Otherwise, the king may be inclined to separate Radha and Govinda. Even the king said that if the Gaudiya Vaishnavas cannot provide some commentary, some explanation, then I will have to separate Radha and Govinda. And it was some kind of questionable also, what kind of sampradaya are they in? So Baladev explained to the king and the different devotees there, I have been initiated in Mysore by the Brahma Sampradaya. That part was understood. They could not challenge that. But then they said, well, he's a young person. Maybe he cannot write a commentary. But Baladev said, wait a minute, give me some time. I will write a commentary on the Vedanta Sutra representing the Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya. I will present to you the authority of Lord Brahma and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in this commentary. And also the beginning of the Sampradaya. Madhvacharya. I will take Madhvacharya's commentary and I will maybe make a few allowable changes, but I will present this to you. So the devotees were thinking, well, he really can't make a commentary very well. He's still a young person. Even though he's initiated, we accept his initiation. He's so that's fine. But how can he make a commentary? And so Baladev Vidyabhushan said, give me a few days. And the king said, okay, I'll give you some allowable time. Maybe a week, 2 weeks, whatever long it took. And when he came back with this commentary, some of the historians say he took 3 or 4 days or 7 days. Some say he took as long as 30 days. But when Baladev Vidyabhushan, he came back and he presented this commentary. Again, this is the authority of spiritual life. All of us have to follow some authority. If we say the authority is the Vedas, Ramakshivasabhurvavam. The Vedas are coming from the personality of Godhead. Okay, but in the Kali Yuga, there's 4 sampradayas. It says Sri Brahma Rudra Sanika Vaishnav Shiti Pavana Chatvaras Kalal Bhavya Yud Kale Purushotama. So the body of Vijaybhushan came back and he had this commentary. And he explained that Radha and Krishna are together because Radha is the eternal energy of the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord and his energy are always together. So it would be not only inappropriate, but offensive to try to separate Radha and Govinda. Again, just to be repetitious, this is taking place about 250 years ago in the Jaipur, northern India area, where the Gaudiya Vaishnavas were present and also other Vaishnavas. So this conversation is going on. And he also explained, not only is it improper to separate Radha and Govinda because they're eternally together, but we are part of the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya. Normally, the explanation given by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is that Vyasadeva is the writer, the author of Vedanta Sutra, and his own commentary should be the best way to understand the Vedanta Sutra. And what is his commentary? Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Purana. So the Gaudiya Vaishnavas before did not have any commentary because they accepted Srimad Bhagavatam is an actual commentary by the self-same author, Srila Vyasadeva. And Srimad Bhagavatam explains all the different features of the Vedic knowledge, which caused Vyasadeva to become sad in the first place. Of course, we don't say he was sad like an ordinary person. He wasn't depressed. But at the same time, he felt unfulfilled. This is how the story goes. He felt unfulfilled, and therefore Narada Muni came to him as his spiritual master and said, you have written all the Vedas, you've done a wonderful thing, you've done a perfect duty, perfect job, and you've done fulfill your obligations. But since you have not sufficiently glorified the personality of Godhead in all of his activities, that's why you're feeling incomplete. So you should write the Srimad Bhagavatam, compile all these activities for the incarnations, Matsya-avatar, Parama-avatar, Lord Ram, all these different incarnations of the Lord. And when you do this, then everything will be fulfilled and complete. So this is how Baladev and Vijaybhushan compiled this commentary that answered all the objections of the Ramanandi Vaishnavas. Again, just like right now, we have many, many different types of controversies going on in the Vaishnava world. We don't have to mention all these, but there's some, for example, like Prabhupada said, when I have validated one of my books, when I've gone over it, reviewed it, and I've confirmed this book is fine, is complete, and is final, there's no reason to go and edit it in the future. Because what happens is if someone edits the books, 5, 10, 15 years after Prabhupada departed, then somebody in 30 years from now is going to say, oh, our contemporary life has changed. We must edit the books again. And somebody 100 years from now is going to want to edit the books another time. So this type of unendless editing and changing is what has happened in all the different religious scriptures of the world. So therefore, there's so much incompleteness or unknown what happened. What is the original manuscript that is taking place in the Bible? Right now, if somebody were to say, what is the original Egyptian? What does the original Aramaic say? No one can really know because it's been changed so many times. So we're presenting here that even now in the Vaishnava world, there's some type of, let's just say, discussions going on. So these discussions were going on several hundred years ago, and these were all amongst the Vaishnava devotees. So the first thing was solved. Radha Krishna or Radha Govinda should not be separated because Radharani is the eternal energy of the Supreme Lord, and he is always with his energy. And the Gaudiya Vaishnavas are a bona fide sampradaya because they're part of the Brahma Sampradaya. And their understandings and policies, philosophy and explanation come from the most topmost scholars of Lord Chaitanya's direct disciples. Rupa Goswami, Jiva Goswami, Gopal Bhatta Goswami, Raghunath Bhatta Goswami. And most of these great devotees have written hundreds of poems, couplets, hundreds of books, many books by these great writers. These great 6 Goswamis of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu were coming from very exalted, wealthy backgrounds, but they left that and became disciples and followed Lord Chaitanya's recommendation to live in Vrindavan, to live very simple lives. They live more or less under a tree, very simple lives. And what did they do? They spent their times day and night sleeping only a few hours a day, baking some buttermilk from the household of devotees, and they wrote these wonderful books. And somebody says, well, I want to read these books by the 6 Goswamis. Okay, we'll start with the #1 book, Nectar of Devotion by Rupa Goswami. Yeah, everybody's recommended to read this book. It is so wonderful. But sometimes we start with Bhagavad Gita, then Srimad Bhagavatam. But if you want to understand how devotional service works, how does it work? I mean, how does it work to work now in our conditioned life? How do we develop ecstasy? We associate with devotees. How do we progress to the high level of prema? It is so far away. It's kind of like as far away as the moon. It's how do we develop prema? But one of the qualities of a devotee recommended nectar devotion, Bhakti Rasa Vedasila by Rupa Goswami, is be patient. Patient means I'm here in my material body right now. I'm 30, 40, 50, 70 years old. And I have not come to the area of prema. I'm not rolling on the ground. I'm not having my hair stand on end. What is wrong with me? It's not there's anything wrong with us. It's just the process takes some time. It could take 1 minute. It could take an hour. It could take many lifetimes. But for most of us, at least for myself, it takes you a really long time. Probably many lifetimes. Hopefully, if we can be able to have kirtan playing when we leave our body, we'll hear the kirtan, the Hare Krishna mantra, we'll go back to Godhead in this lifetime. That is what we're trying for. For example, Jagam and his mother was living with us starting about more than 30 years ago. And then she was taking care of herself, doing just fine. She had some medical conditions we had to take care of. And then she had a stroke. And then we started taking care of her. And then she had another stroke. And so we would have to take care of her. Like I would take her for an hour in the morning. Jagavani would mostly stay home, take care of her during the day. Then in the evening, another hour or so taking care of her, doing different kind of nursing activities. So that was what happened. And we realized that this idea of not only associating, serving a devotee is such a wonderful thing. It is called Vaishnava Sangha, Vaishnava Association. If you can serve some devotee, whether it's just hearing from somebody who's departed a long time ago, it's called Vani. Vani Seva. We're associating and serving the devotee by listening to like reading Bhagavad Gita. It is a great way to associate with the topmost Mahabhagavat devotee just by hearing of Vani. So we were taking care of Jagam and his mother. It is also a kind of Vaishnava Seva, physical, whatever's needed to be done. And we were taking care of her. And then when she had a final stroke, we took her to the emergency room. She had this final stroke in her wheelchair in front of Sri Shivada Kalachandji. She was right there in the temple room. And she just kind of slumped over, looked like she was asleep. We didn't actually know what happened. We took her home. We could put her in bed. We kind of thought she just fell asleep and she wasn't waking up. But she was breathing normally. Everything seemed to be good or fine on one level. And then we get either the next day or the next morning or in the evening, we took her to the hospital because she wasn't waking up at all. She looked like she was okay, but she wasn't waking up. Then they told us in the emergency room that she's had a final stroke and she's not going to wake up again. So we took her home and started, what do you call it, hospice care. Hospice means somebody is beyond any kind of medical attention. They're going to pass away from their body in 1 day, 2 days, a week, 2 weeks. You don't know when, but hospice means any kind of medical care is being discontinued because they're not able to survive in this body anymore. So some people on hospice care may live 1 day or 2 days or a few weeks, or in the case of Jayamana's mother, her name was Subhama, her devotee name, Subhama, I'm sorry, Sevananda. Sevananda. She survived about 30 days with no food or water. Maybe she would open her mouth, maybe she was just conscious enough to open her mouth and we give her some apple juice or a tablespoon of water for a few weeks. Then after about 3 weeks, she also could not digest or swallow anything. Her body became completely unable to do anything at all. So we were there in hospice care. We had a hospice nurse staying at nighttime to the Medicare arrangements. And then some other nurse would come sometimes during the day. We knew she would pass away pretty soon, but we thought it would be much sooner than like 30 or 31 days. So it took a long time. And so we were just trying to have kirtan playing. And so, and actually the day before she left her body in the morning time around 9 o'clock, one devotee came and sang kirtan, singing beautiful prayers, Govindamati Pursham, or I forget, but your beautiful prayers and Hare Krishna mantra. Then the devotee went off to work. Then about 9 o'clock, it was detected she left her body. So this is part of it's called Vaishnava Association, Vaishnava Sangha, Vaishnava Seva. And if we read the books like Nectar of Devotion, it is described that we should associate with devotees, we should try to serve the Vaishnava devotees. And these are the wonderful aspects we can read of from these different books for the Vaishnava acharyas. So again, this type of authority, which was questioned a couple 100 years ago, is part of the history. And now we have this wonderful Bhashya, it's called Govinda Bhashya by Baladev Vijayabhushan. And one might question, why is there a controversy? Why is there questions being asked in the Vaishnava society if everything is presented in Prabhupada's books in a perfect way? And the answer is that by Krishna's arrangement, he is allowing all of us to come together to, in a sense, restart the whole movement. Whatever has been done previously, which may be considered improper, it is all of us have this opportunity to become Krishna conscious. We may not take part in some international discussions, but at least in our very homes, in our very hearts, to our own daily intentions, we should make some minimal activities which we can do to become more and more God conscious. Again, the questions we're asking, the etiquette, why are you worshiping Radha and Govinda without worshiping Narayan first? This is not a question of philosophy, it's a question of etiquette. And the etiquette was previously, in many cases, that Narayan was worshipped first. So this King Jai Singh, he was wanting all the devotees, the Vaishnava devotees, to have a discussion, to bring all their intelligence together, to try to understand how they can perform devotional service without controversy, by having proper etiquette. And the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Govinda, arranged for his devotee to come and explain these things to the king and all the other devotees. And this type of questions all were answered. Radha and Govinda can be worshipped together. Like it explains in the Vedanta Sutra. They can be worshipped as Parakiya Ras, unmarried, or they can be worshipped together as Swakiya Ras, is married. Both are proper. So if anybody asks you, why are you worshiping Radha and Krishna together? You're not married. The explanation is that this is called Swakia Ras, they're not married, and Parakia, I'm sorry, Swakia Ras means they're married, and Parakia Ras means they're not married. Both relationships are eternal. And if a devotee worships the Supreme Lord in either category, it's enough to bring one to the understanding of one's relationship as a servant of the Supreme Lord. Both are proper. So these are some of the questions. All of us are going to have our neighbors, our relatives, ask us questions. And we're not going to be able to answer these questions just by hearing a class about it. We have to actually on our own read the books. We have to do something in a disciplinary way in our own homes based upon our own determination. And anyway, thank you all for coming to class. I'm going to finish the purport now. Any questions, please?
You said at least 7 days. In those 7 days,
He was Parisha Maharaj was listening from Shukadeva Goswami.
then exactly found the real declaration.
No, that's a different thing. That's a different thing, yeah. Maybe I when I bring things together in class, it's probably my fault. Mars Bharat, his pastime as a king, was when he was off in the forest and he fell down and hit his head and he remembered a deer. That's a different story, I'm sorry.
Or the same person, right?
No, different person.
Oh, it's a different person.
Yeah. Shukadeva Goswami spoke to Maharaj Pariksit the first time. And the second time, Sudha Goswami spoke to the sages at Nami Sharmanya. And all these sages were listening, and Shaunaka Rishi was a spokesman for the sages. Excuse me for bringing these things together too much. I gave it as an example, not that it was the same story. Mr. Srimad Bhagavatam was spoken because Srila Vyasadeva was feeling incomplete, and Narada Muni said, you must completely glorify all the activities, incarnations, and pastimes of the Supreme Lord. Then you will feel complete. All the Vedas were complete before, but not complete. Sometimes we'll find something that seems contradictory. Sometimes there'll be a statement that, I'm trying to give you an example of. The Vedas were complete because Srila Vyasadeva done what he was asked to do. But they were incomplete because the pastimes of the Lord were not sufficiently glorified. So sometimes you'll find something complete and incomplete, and both are true. I'm trying to find an example. Sometimes we may ask, trying to think of an example of. Well, there's many examples. For example, we're studying about spiritual knowledge. The spirit soul is different from the material body. The spirit soul is eternal, and the material body is temporary. So someone may ask, how can we understand that? Here's a better example. The Supreme Lord loves all of us. And he allows all the spirit souls in the spiritual world, the infallible spirit souls, and the fallible spirit souls in the material world. He allows us to have independence. Why does he allow us to have independence? Why doesn't he force us to love him? Everybody would be completely in love. There will be no reason for the material world of suffering. Everything would be fine. This is kind of a good question to ask, but it's inconceivable that we are simultaneously one with God, and we're different from him. We're the same in quality as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but different in quantity. It's like a drop of ocean water is the same as the whole ocean, but the drop is very, very small, and the whole ocean is completely big. So we're simultaneously the same as the Supreme Lord in quality, but different in quantity. So it's kind of like it's simultaneously it's one and different. We just try to understand these things. Certain things are beyond our ability to understand. We understand they're inconceivable. Excuse me. And we just accept that they're inconceivable. I'll finish the purport, but any more questions, please? I'm never go for it. Please speak loud. I'm sure there's too many echoes. I'm sorry. Be almost in the microphone, please. The echoes in here are really bad. It really bothers me.
Sorry. So one of the questions you talked about was like, why do you pray Krishna, why not Narayan?
Okay, yeah. Why do we worship Krishna first without worshiping Narayan?
Yeah. Sorry.
Well, I don't know if I could give a perfect answer. A lot of times in the traditional historical world of all the Vedic knowledge, maybe 1,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, 20, 50, 100,000 years ago, Narayan was worshipped first. Remember, in the previous age, temple worship was the method of Sankirtan. It's a method of God realization. And before that, performing great sacrifices. Gold and hundreds of millions of tons of ghee and gold were used and just thrown away afterwards. People were so wealthy. It could be in those ages, can't say for sure, that Narayan was worshipped first. Can't say for sure, but this etiquette or this type of etiquette or history may have been passed down. Certain people in certain sampradayas, they worship Narayan first, and that's fine. Narayan, Vishnu, Krishna, Lord Ram, all these are the personalities of God yet. All this Vaishnava worship is beautiful and perfect, but it may be differently arranged at different times. Apparently Narayan was worshipped first because that's why these devotees were asking about him. It was a type of etiquette, not a rule, but a kind of etiquette. So we also worship Lord Narayan too. If you see Sri Upanishad, you look on the front of it, who do you see? Four-armed Narayan. Beautiful. So because all the forms are simultaneously together in Lord Ram or Lord Krishna, if you worship, if you chant the Hare Krishna mantra, you're automatically worshiping all the different forms of the Lord. I'm sorry. Can you give a microphone so everybody can hear? It's just really
So I just wanted to understand, so the last 7 days of his life, when he did not do anything, he was listening from his song about God, but was it then, like, do we know then he went, because never really went to the he never came back?
Oh, yeah, he was bitten by a snake, or if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
He left his body, and of course he was liberated. Go back to the spiritual world, yeah. He was like different devotees are known as being a perfect example of chanting. Remembering Prahlad Maharaj, he was always remembering Krishna. So Maharaj Pariksit, he was an example of one of the 9 processes of devotional service called hearing. And he heard perfectly these 7 days. And he practically performed a type of hearing that may be beyond our ability. No food, no water, no sleep. He just heard for 7 days. These personalities are so beyond our imagination, but that's how the story goes, and that is really what happened. So excuse me if I get different stories mixed up and don't explain it properly in class. Then that's my fault. But the whole Passion Maharaj Bharat is like Bharat Varsha is a name for India. India is called Bharat Varsha. And India is named after Maharaj Bharat because he was, such a great soul. And this took place more than 5,000 years ago, if I remember. It's a long time ago. But this past time, Sridhar Goswami speaking to Maharaj Pariksit was right about when Kali Yuga began, right around that time, 5,000 years ago. And then the Bhagavatam was repeated again by Sridhar Goswami to the sages at Nami with Shaunak Rishi and all these different sadhus and sages and saintly persons hearing again. And they also wanted to perform a 1,000-year sacrifice to ward off all the evil effects of Kali Yuga. They wanted to satisfy God and satisfy all the great sages. So they wanted to perform this 1,000-year sacrifice, and it was quite a wonderful thing. I will finish the rest of the purport here.
I have a question.
Please, the microphone is free so I can.
So Prabhu, in previous ages, Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, so the people from the previous ages, they do not know that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
I don't actually know what their realization was. In previous age was temple worship. Temple worship, whatever deities you have, Lord Narayan, Lord Vishnu. I just don't exactly know exactly what the temple worship is like. But they were very, very spiritually advanced. So they must know that beyond this material world is a spiritual world, and the purpose of human life is to go back home, back to God. Surely they knew these things because they were much more advanced than us now in Kali Yuga. And even before Lord Chaitanya came, even simply from the Christian tradition, people know that God is the supreme being, that our lives are supposed to be dedicated to serving God. Even without the different perfect Vedic knowledge, they know these simple Vedic facts. In the previous age, it was wonderful sacrifices, and I'm sure the sacrifices were for the pleasure of Lord Narayan, Lord Vishnu, that they surely knew that the personality of Godhead is the receiver of all these sacrifices. And in the previous age, Satya Yuga, people were almost fully God conscious to begin with. They almost didn't have to do very much. They lived 100,000 years. They could sit in meditation and gradually see the Lord in the heart, Paramatma. And so some of the details may not be described exactly how the people, what realization they had, and how they perfected their lives. But in Satya Yuga, people were pretty much sinless just to begin with. And if you see Lord in the heart, Paramatma, you begin to see him through meditation. You want to serve him, you develop love for him. You're really doing well in your life. We have such hard times in Kali Yuga. We need a really, really simple method for God realization. We're so fallen, so forgetful, and such addicted to bad habits. Let me finish. Once you be captivated by this information, he should desire to transfer himself to that eternal world and extricate himself from this false reflection of reality. But one is too much attached to this material world, it is very difficult to cut that attachment. But if he takes to Krishna consciousness, there is chance of gradually becoming detached. One has to associate himself with devotees, those who are in Krishna consciousness. One should search out a society dedicated to Krishna consciousness and learn how to discharge devotional service. In this way, he can cut off his attachment to the material world. One cannot become detached from the attraction of the material world simply by dressing himself in saffron cloth. Therefore, one should take it very seriously that devotional service, as described in the 12th chapter, is the only way to get out of this false representation of the real tree. It says here, therefore, one should take it very seriously that devotional service, as described in the 12th chapter, is the only way to get out of this false representation of the real tree. In chapter 14, the contamination of all kinds of processes by material nature is described. Only devotional service is described as purely transcendental. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Rama.